Okay, there, James. Oh, that is such a cool score. There's so many fun things in there. Like just when I feel that things are starting to trend a certain way, then I get another score that shows me that that is not what is going on at all. So, yeah, thank you so much for this really great entry. I noticed that there was this weird overtone. I was thinking, oh, is there some sort of strange harmonic that I'm not seeing in the score? Sort of going. Yeah, kind of like I guess, yeah, like an F sharp or something, but like slightly off key. But anyways, like it's the mock-up that you're using, or sorry, the mock-up, the sound set you're using in your mock-up has some really great instruments in it, but like when it plays like brass all together, there's a kind of a slightly kind of a grindy sound that's a little bit more electronic. But yeah, but some of the winds are just fantastic. Yeah, I'm not sure what application this is. I'm wondering if it's MuseScore or another similar application, maybe Lily Pond or something. Watch out for the staves. Excuse me, that not the staves, the bars in an orchestral score. Like the brackets should always agree with the staff lines, right? So so this should be like one combined staff line. I'm sure you know that. Maybe you're just having a hard time getting your application to do what it was supposed to do, and that is understood. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about E. All right. So I feel like you have got way too much weight when you pull out of the chord, right? So like the whole idea here is that non-decrescendo, crash, 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 and so on, and then everybody hits a chord, and then they fade, and then some pitches remain playing. And actually, what are they supposed to do? They're actually in the Barvinsky score. They're supposed to last for a full 2 bars, right? But everything should fade down to a much softer place. But like as you could hear in your mock-up, you didn't mark any diminuendo here in your trumpet parts, and they are just screamingly loud, right? They're just like so loud. And then like the oboes and the flutes and violins just sort of act as an overtone that underscores the loudness of the trumpets. So maybe you don't need trumpets there. Maybe you just need your flutes and oboes and your strings here. Maybe you could just drop out one of the voices of your flutes and just have like a single flute tying forwards, and just the stacked violins here. Yeah, and then it just wouldn't be so darn harsh. And you really should tell us like what is the dynamic going forwards, even if the dynamic is going to arrest, because you see, the problem here is that like especially like with your mock-up, which has completely no, your mock-up has while it is crafted to sound musical, you have to give it all the directions because it is an electronic thing and it knows no better than what it's told, right? So it doesn't know that it's supposed to diminuendo down to like pianissimo or something to really, really fade away. So it just like goes down to the next step. So by the time it gets to the end of this dynamic, it is probably just sounding forte, right? So you have to write in what it is. But like even if you're dealing with real live people, you should be telling them that you should go down to pianissimo here because that's what the music needs, right? It's weird. There's a staccato on this half note here. So diminuendo down, give everybody the pianissimo sign, and then except for your instruments that hold on, they should go down to piano, and then they should continue holding, right? For across two bars. Now, if you don't like that, if you don't like what Barvinsky had in his original score, then that's fine. Or it's a possibility that you scored this from the piano template version that I had that didn't have the tie in it. That was the first one that, and I caught the error. I put in the final complete one. Actually, I went through a couple of versions. As people pointed out, one tiny little thing that I could fix after another, which was fine. I think next time I just might have another pair of eyes on it to proofread it for me. But be that as it may, it looks like you left out like the first bum 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 right here, and then da 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 bum 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 bum. So here's the problem with not going da 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 right at the beginning. The problem is this, that this pitch is the same as this pitch and is really, really the same as these pitches. So really it is kind of like, oh yeah, we're coming back to that really annoying place where the trumpets were too loud. So that is the strongest argument I can think of to tone down the trumpets and not have them push into, just kind of willfully push into this silence. And then, the other thing too is that, like, what was the purpose of going bum 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 at the beginning and then da 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 bum 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 bum? So the purpose of that was to distract you from the held octaves. The held octaves are holding away at doing their thing. Actually, an octave lower than you have scored here, but it's fine. So, as they decay, as they, in the piano part, Barvinsky is saying, look way down here. Da, 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 da. So eventually he's going to return back to the same B octaves. But the fact that he does it, he starts way, way low, and then as the sound decays, he rises right back up to those octaves. Means that he has refreshed, like coming back to the B, he's changed the context of it so much that you don't have you don't feel like, I'm just doing this again, right? It's just the same damn note again. But let me tell you, you take this out and you make this loud, and it just feels like the same damn note again, right? Although, I mean, it's obviously you beautifully scored this. It's not taking anything away from you. But it's just these darn trumpets, right? So could you throw in some bassoon or bass clarinet or something? Oh, excuse me, you have bass clarinet. I meant to say contrabassoon. Now, I am not fond of this, using an X note head for a cymbal. It's completely unnecessary in concert music. You have to think of it this way. This is being used. A lot of applications. I'm seeing scores Dorco. I'm seeing scores with from MuseScore and so on, and it just is getting used as a default. But that is not the default. Think of the thousands and thousands and thousands of cymbal parts that have been scored up to this decade. All right? Where the cymbal player is perfectly happy reading a normal note. So why change it? There's just no need to change it. It almost like begs the question with a cymbal player who's not run into those scores. Like, is there something special I need to do here? No. No, there isn't anything special. That's just how we've decided to score your cymbals from now on. So don't do it, all right? Just have a normal note head. All right. Okay, so getting into this piece, I'm trying not to make these lectures so long but I'm just seeing all these details and I love talking about them. So I like where you've put these winds up here. You haven't really corrected the dynamic on your score from fortissimo from before, so they're still playing. I think they're still playing really loudly in the mock-up. So, and what is the dynamic here too, right? Shouldn't it be like soft and maybe getting a little louder? And then here, like this should come in and be pianissimo because it's really, really important that this melody not get distracted from, right? I mean, yeah, you're scoring it for trumpet, so it's not like it's going to be in any kind of trouble. All the same. Yeah, I'm not so sure that this works. Like first trumpet, then trumpet and horn, and then just horn, right? Because like what's going to happen is the trumpet's going to thicken up and it's going to feel really nice and rich, and then suddenly you're going to have no trumpet, right? Unless the trumpet fades out, right? So if you have a fade in and a fade out, then that would be a nice transition. And then muted strings right in here. That's lovely. And you know, this is perfect. Da 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 ba dum. All right, the implied leap here. And this is also gorgeous right in here. Oboes and clarinets working together on that harmonized part. Beautiful, beautiful little polyphonic part. And then English horn, yeah, da da da, and it's really soft strings right in here. Da 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 da. Now here is where yeah. All right. Um, what if this were a different instrument that played an octave higher? Then you could get a straight line. You get a B line. What if it was an oboe? Say oboe plays an octave higher. Then you get an absolute straight line all the way down to this G. Rather than right in here, you have to compromise, right? So this bassoon is wandering its way down. It all sounds gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. And then when you get to this B, you sort of have to jump up an octave. Or excuse me, D. Sorry, I meant to say D. When you get to this D, you have to jump back an octave to B, right? And then it just all sounds a little confused here at the end. Like it's not quite, you know, we sort of had to hitch back up again and then descend again. So I feel all of these lines by Barvinsky have been really carefully worked out to descend at a steady pace all the way down, right? And then and then arrive at their destination, just nice and gradual and everything else. So yeah, so consider that. Like, what if you did English horn here and then oboe answering an octave higher and then wended its way down? There's no question that bassoon could be playing this an octave higher. Then by the time you get to here, it's all completely clear, and you could play this octave if you want to, or you just leave it out. Just I think that this note is the most unnecessary note in the entire process. So that would be my suggestion here. I'd say, like, otherwise it's absolutely gorgeous. And having told you to jump this up an octave, I have to say that I actually really like how the positions of everything, the way that you've got them scored. And I love the idea of the English horn connecting with the middle register of the bassoon right in here and then descending further. So you don't have to take my advice. I think it's great, but I still don't like this note right in here. I don't think it's necessary. Anyway, but yeah, and then the nice, really, really, really soft scoring here. You know what you might want to do? Like, if you hear that overtone too in your mock-up, just do an experiment. Figure out which of those notes is creating the overtone and why, right? And it has to do with that wouldn't happen in a normal performance, right? But it's one of these notes is causing the overtone of the F sharp. So you've got to figure out, like, which one those is. So, like, maybe like just erase one, or delete one and then play the last chord, and then that doesn't give you the answer, then delete another one, and so on. I suspect it's one of these B's, right? So like a B would be creating an overtone of a fifth way up high, and so one of them is just a little too excited, right? Possibly the sounding B here in the clarinet. That would be my first suspicion. Would be this guy here. Something about it. And its combination with the other winds, I think, is setting off that overtone. And now, jumping back to D, I feel that this is just really, really gorgeous. there's it almost sounds like in your mock-up that these are measured tremolo, like it's going da 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 da. Do you know what I mean? Like if you listen to it, I mean it's probably just an illusion, but maybe that's something you could actually add, right? And then you just get rid of the slur and just have these players going, taka taka taka. This is a place where I think that you have scored everything so delicately that you could probably get away with doubling these parts with harp to really good effect, right? And almost to the part where I would actually have you go take the harp all the way to here, and then have your double bass go pluck pluck pluck. I'm just going to check something really quickly. Yeah, okay. So you have pizzicato on the previous page. So exactly what I was expecting. So what if you went like harp doubling all the way down, and then when you got to this note, don't even bother with the harp. Just have the double basses go pluck pluck pluck, right? So that you have the cascade just a little bit better supported. But yeah, like see if you can throw in that idea. Tucka 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 tucka. It just sounds so cool. You don't have to have it in the harp. Just have single notes in the harp if you decide to use that idea. But one way or another, it just needs a little teeny bit more support. All right, so the proper cancellation for pizzicato is not ord, but arco. All right, so really, 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 really do not use ord to cancel arco. Because, like, there might be a situation where, like, you might be playing pizzicato like sultasto or something like that, right? So like ord would cancel the sultasto, but it wouldn't cancel the pizzicato. But obviously here this is going to arco. But yeah, so so the norm is also a good one to cancel like special string effects and so on. But yeah, but don't use ord to cancel pizzicato. Arco is the correct term. All right, So those are our cascading octaves. So no matter what you do with these octaves, as they cascade downwards, and the strength here grows, especially in your horns and trombones, this will just sort of get wiped out. But that's just going to happen, right? You could add a little bit more. You could have more instruments join in a little bit, maybe oboes and or clarinets or something like that could start to thicken the cascading up as it descends. However, what concerns me the most is the transition from here to here. It just feels like these two parts are just kind of chunked together. Like I'm not seeing like a gradual, like here you have a push in your bones, but like you have a push in your bones. But you don't really have there's like the sense of the texture connecting here I'm worried about. Now, there's one other little notation thingy to deal with here, and that is the sempre crescendo with the dashed line. All right, so you know what? I don't like sempre crescendo here because, like, as an orchestral marking, because the implication is that that the power is being piled on, right? We're starting from pianissimo and we are pushing all the way to forte by the time we get here, right? So it's like, that makes sense for a pianist, right? It's just like it's saying, hey, just start to lay on the, pump the gas, right? But the thing is that you can't just throw that at the orchestra, the sense of urgency, because you throw off the balance of all these other instruments if things get too loud too quickly, right? So poco a poco crescendo. Now, let me tell you something. Like, this is an actual true story, okay? I was recording somebody, I was recording some chamber music that I had written, and the violinist had sort of gotten a little bit lost in my instrument part, and she said, "Oh, geez, could you not score like this?" All right, I had poco crescendo, right? So she said, like, could you just not do that? It's just too many lines in a row. Like it gets my eyes confused with the staff lines, and I kind of don't know what it is. Like if you're saying poco, and then the crescendo comes in much later, like, but when I'm right here, I don't really know whether it means little by little crescendo or diminuendo later on, right? Because like a lot of times, like the players will just come in and they have no time to practice. They didn't practice your stuff. They've never seen it before, and they're going to sit down and they're going to play it as best they can, and they might get it in one take, and then they're going to move on to the next thing, right? So just write poco a poco crescendo and leave out the dashed line. The dashed line is just more information. Poco a poco crescendo between a soft mark and a loud mark will be assumed by the player to just cover the entire passage. So they have no problem and they do not need the dashed line. And it saves you a bunch of junk up here. Here, I think you could actually have one solid, like instead of having two separate dynamic marks, I think you could just put one mark here in a full score and then separate it out when you do the parts. Same thing here with the bassoons. Or just do this, like say have like piano here, piano there, and then a joint poco a poco crescendo afterwards. And then I think both like the score reader, the conductor will get it, with both parts going to forte. The other thing that makes this really kind of chunky is that the accelerando is just one bar. I think you should start piling on the speed from about right the middle, right? Just so that the piumosa really like has a lot of, just like it was prepared. And there was some, if there's some other way that you can connect the texture going forward to maybe in the horns and, right. Like maybe like more brass could start, like all the brass you're going to use here could join in da 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 chord, right? I think that might work well. And like maybe some of this could be doubled in the upper winds, like maybe this by the time you get to here, right? And maybe some of this could be doubled in these winds so that they join together. Yeah, it's going to wipe out some of your octaves, but at least you'll get a sense of connection here. All right, blah, blah, blah. I need to get to talking about your orchestration. I can't believe that I said blah, blah, blah in a lecture. So, yeah, so you've got your, you've got the octaves and thirds transcribed here. And this is nice, yada da da, yada da da, nice high cello scoring and just coming right in under the violas, and just makes it for a really nice sound. So zero problems here. Like I said before, I think you need to go bum 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 right here at the end. Maybe add harp to the cascades. All right, so I talked about all that stuff. So below you have got yet another octave to your horns, and then you have got an octave lower than the horns. You've got the same harmony part. Okay, so I think that's really essential. Like, it makes the tone really dark here, really incredibly dark. To add those, basically just kind of you're taking what was above as so below, right? Just adding the adding this entire line here, these three voices an octave lower, and yeah, just it'll make it really, really, like I said, it'll make it dark and very brooding, and that color, of course, is going to cloud our ability to hear these cheery little raindrops in here. But maybe they need a little bit of gloom. They're too happy. And then you got these, just kind of trading off on these F sharps here, and then just kind of pushing them louder and louder. I don't know if you. This is weird. So you have trombones 1 and 2, trombone 3, and bass trombone. And I guess you're just doing a thing where like you want 2 trombones at any given time. I'm not so keen on this pushing and then disappearing, because like this, the falling off the cliff is definitely something that people will hear in the timbre of those F sharps being held. The players can just like play, like you could have 2 trombones play this. Like you'd have trombones 1 and 2, and then you can have trombone 3 and bass, right? The trading off between these doubled pitches, right? Simple. All right. All right, so going on, we're getting to our Ravel part, right? Now here, you are harmonizing with both winds and strings on the upper parts, and then like on these lower parts, middle and lower parts, harmony with the brass as well. So it's like really spread out harmony. So you hear what that's kind of doing to the octaves here, right? It's like really, it's making them a little harder to hear, and it's making the strings a little harder to hear. There is a solution, though. What if the strings, instead of going divisé on all the harmony, what if the harmony was really beautifully worked out to be inhabiting the winds and the brass, and the strings were just playing octaves here? Try that out. Like, just copy this, make a new version just with all octaves here in the strings, and see what happens. By the miracle of fooling your ear, it will sound as if the strings are playing all of the harmony, but they'll be stronger, right? They'll be stronger and clearer, and without so many sawtooth waveforms on all of the harmony, you'll be able to hear these leaping octaves better. The other thing is, bring down the dynamic here. I would say that your trombones here could be pianissimo, crescendo to mezzo forte. Pianissimo, this is fine. Crescendo to mezzo forte here. Don't get too loud too soon with your brass here. And then I think that, like, if you tame your parts right like that, I think that you'll get a really, really great effect. And then also, yeah, this is really cool right in here. The timpani kind of helping to keep the pulse going in the broken octaves without actually breaking the octaves themselves. Okay, so now we're getting into some serious stuff. Now here you're really piling on the juice, and I would say that, like, it's really, really important here, I would say, to stop splitting up your parts divisi and just to let them be octaves and let everybody else do the harmony here. Because, like, especially pushing into this fortissimo, because you're going to the octaves anyways, right? In your violins. All right. So, but I've dissected this enough. I think that you can completely take it from here. Just be aware that the that the articulation here on tenuto for strings and winds is really different. Like, here you have some of them, these are slurred and some of them are tenuto. So, like, which is it? I would choose one and stick with it for everybody, rather than having some tenuto and some slurred. So tenuto for brass and winds is sort of like doot 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 doot, and if they're sort of in a row, they could actually seem to be like doot doot doot, right? So, like, this might end up sounding more legato than you think. However, with strings, it's zoom zoom zoom, right? So it's because it is a kind of articulation that just, it's like a button turning a sound on and off. It doesn't have a like a little attack and then filling in the note and then letting go of it. Like, just the articulation style that is that is used by so many orchestra players to get a really beautifully shaped note. It isn't beautifully shaped. It's just a bunch of building blocks hitting you in the head, right, or hitting you in the ear. So yeah, so just be careful about just dropping tenuto marks into a score that had tenuto marks in the piano. It might work for piano, but it means a different thing for the other instruments. But I mean, I still think it would. I actually really like the idea of the strings at least playing tenuto here. If everybody did, it would be kind of cool. Just very, very direct sound. Okay, so bum, bum, bum. Now this is strange. So this is the second or third time I have seen this problem in a score, and so I'm wondering if somebody did like a version of this, like a template that would work in a particular application, and then shared it around. So this whole thing about like F double sharp, F natural, E sharp, it is so much the same as this other score, at least one other score, if not two other scores that I've seen. Okay, but this isn't this. So I'm kind of starting to assume now that this was not separate people being inspired to change the arc of the melody. It was perhaps one person changing a part, right? So I don't know. So maybe let me know in the comments. But like, this is not supposed to be G natural going to F double sharp because these are the same pitches, right? And harmonically speaking. And I'm wondering if it's because of the tie in the piano part, right? So there's a tie across, and then there's all this chunk, 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 chunk in the middle. So if somebody were transcribing this for piano or for like just sort of separating it out into threads, if they might have missed the fact that this was tied, and then because the tie was taken away, maybe something about the app turned this into a natural. That's what I'm suspecting, right? But it just sounds weird in the da 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 da, but it's supposed to be da 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 da. This is supposed to be tied to the same pitch, right? And it just throwing this in here distracts from this wonderful da 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 da. Do you know what I mean? Like adding an extra melody note messes up this beautiful push here. Is my opinion, because it's like it's gotten us to focus on too much on the melody, right? What is, yes, Barvinsky wants us to feel the melody and to see its importance, but he doesn't want it to dominate the sound picture. The sound picture should be, we should be thinking about the riot of color and sound and smashing away and so on and so forth, right? So just watch out for adding melody notes here. And this is another thing I'm seeing in a lot of scores. It's just like half bar of, some instruments will get like a half bar of solidity, and then there'll be other instruments that are playing like the full dotted football, right? So I'm not so sure I'm convinced by that. I mean, in one score, it made sense because it was almost acting as an extension of the timpani strikes. So the timpani would go boom, and then the basses and I think contrabassoon and tuba would go and it would like all fit together. But in this case, I don't think that you're really justified in letting go of the double basses here. I think the double basses should just grind away, the same as the tuba and the trombone and so on. Yeah, okay, so here you have trombone above tuba. So this is a classic trick of Conrad Pope. And I mean, it is so fun to see it in this score. You have to be careful though, because you're also doubling the trombone part with contrabassoon. So it's like it has a slightly different effect. And then of course, you're doubling the tuba part with bass clarinet. So like it's a slight moderation of tone. But yeah, it really has a focused sound when you put the tuba on top, because it kind of sucks up the bass trombone's overtones. Yeah, I mean it's just such a fun idea though. Yeah, I mean, about the only thing that I would say here is I'm wondering whether or not you have, in your transcription, your direct transcription of the melody, you have pitched it too low, right? I mean, just because, like, Barvinsky only has 5 fingers on each hand, though, judging by some of his concerto writing, you would think that he had an extra finger here or there. However, just because he only had 5 fingers on each hand doesn't mean that you have to limit your violins to a place where a lot of what they do is going to get sort of beaten up by the instruments around it. So, for instance, like the second violins here, there's so much, you have so much weight on there with triple trumpets that you practically don't even need your second violins here. Or you could have second violins playing in octaves, so some of that tone gets doubled by winds, and then you could put your first violins also in octaves, right, so that you get more weight on the middle, but you also get the higher pitch. Or you could just take everything up an octave, one way or another, so you just get more of an expansive sound, especially going up to this high C sharp. I mean, sending your your first violins up into the stratosphere to, all the way up to C sharp 7 is not a bad thing occasionally. It can be really, really exciting for the listener and for the players. Yeah. And then like here, like we also have just like really, really quacky oboes down here, like this, like, you have like this A2 oboes going all the way down to this D sharp. So it just really, and it just has kind of a grindy sound. And of course, it'll get sucked up by the trumpets. What if you jack these guys up an octave, maybe adding another octave below when you could by some extra players or something, like Divisi or something. Okay, what if you jack this up an octave, and then you jacked up the oboes an octave, so they're playing where the flutes are, and the flutes were playing yet an octave higher to double where the first violins would go, because they can also go all the way up to high C sharp, right? Occasionally, it's fun to do, and that way, I think you avoid some problems here. Like problem number one. The first violins, of course, are going to absorb the color of the flute, and it's when the flute starts to get here like above F double sharp, then its tone or their tone, I should say, will start to come through a little bit clearly. You don't really have to have this like opposite stems kind of thing. All you have to do is just say A2 from here, right? Just you don't have to have everybody's like if it is a unified part, then just say A2 and then just have it on a single voice, all right? It's so much easier to read. Okay, so the trumpets are kind of blasting away the flute sound, and so are the oboes for that matter, right? And then the rest of it is getting absorbed. But you just jack everything up an octave, and then you can really hear the flutes backing up the violins much more clearly. Like here the flutes are in their middle register. They haven't, they start to get up into the bottom part of the high register here. But in the middle register, they're still not as strong as you think. I mean, and I hate for people to think, oh well, geez, I guess flutes are really weak across all of their. No, not really. They're weaker in their first octave, and then kind of from or their first, think about it like the first five. The first five diatonic notes, like C to G, right? That is the most delicate, weakest part. Now, going from A up to G an octave higher, that's where you get into the middle register, and it has this mixed quality of like the kind of tweedier kind of a sound in the high register and the breathier sound in the low register coming together in a kind of a mixed voice. It's beautiful, beautiful idea, beautiful sound. And then from A up, you get the really bright, brilliant sound that's hard to suppress, right? Or hard for other instruments to completely suppress. So, yeah. So I just think that having the melody down here so low really kind of limits the scope of what's going on. So you could just leave your trumpets down here chugging away and just take everything else up an octave, and you get this big, beautiful sound. And then it makes it frees up these accompanying parts here in bassoon and clarinet, and here in violas, they just become much, much more clear because the melody isn't smashing across them so much. I mean, of course, you'll still have the trumpets to deal with, but at least the sound of the strings will separate more, and you'll just get more clearance, and so on, and it just and goes on. Now here, what does Barvinsky do at the end? He goes down instead of up, and I think you should too. right? So instead of keeping things in exactly the same register and so on, he like just really goes bum 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 bum, right? And by here's where you stack the octaves, and it gets really powerful and bright and so on and so forth. But then doesn't it make it hard to sort of fade out and then kind of go into a more mysterious place, right? I mean, I think we got some wasted trombone opportunities right in here. Maybe you could just leave off the upper winds and just drop your strings and drop your strings and give me 20. So drop your strings down here and also add the trombones and so on. So there's more weight in the mid range, kind of like there is in the piano part. I think that really sets up the delicacy of the following part. More than having high pitches right in here. It's just something to think about. I'm not saying how to do it, but it's just an alternative. Okay, so one last little comment about D before we jump back, and that is that watch out about big tutis like this. Try not to set it and forget it. Do you know what I mean? And of course you didn't forget it, but like it's once you get everybody into their lane, then having them hammer away for 11 bars straight. You might think, well, 11 bars isn't really all that long, is it, Thomas? But the thing is actually to the audience, it is kind of a long time, even at high speed, which I really respect the fact that you really did like jack up the tempo there, which is great. So exciting. So is there some way that this texture could have evolved over the course of 11 bars with maybe instruments trading off functions, or registers, or just kind of almost a call and response between different sections working in different ways? You got all these trombones doing nothing. You got an English horn who's just checking his Facebook now on his on his smartphone. So yeah, I mean, and it's passages like this where like where the like having a third player, like a piccolo player or something like that, like makes a lot of sense. So like you kind of added a lot of trombones. We've got 4 trombones going. Try to just work with 3, I would say, in your expectations. Of course, like kind of looking over all the stuff that you scored for trombone, I don't really see anything. I don't see any place where you use all 4 trombones at once. So perhaps that was just an error on your part of like thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to have 3 trombones. Oh, I shouldn't have a bass trombone. Well, I guess the third is the bass, and then maybe they'll change to bass and something. Don't worry about it. The third player is playing bass trombone throughout the entire thing, right? Usually, and it's so taken for granted that people just think of the third trombone as being a bass trombone player without having to say any more about it. Okay. Now, finally, let's jump back to the beginning of your piece. So, I mean, here we can hear like some really great stuff and some not so great stuff about the mock-up, right? You can hear that like some individual wind textures have a lot of beautiful. They have like a real beautiful, familiar sound to them, but at the same time, they also, like in combination with other instruments, they kind of become sort of dense sounding, right? And I think it's also like the harp has there was an entry recently where I had remarked that it sounded a bit as if the harp had been recorded in a closet, right? And I think this is a completely different sound set than that one. But it just feels the same way. It just feels a little claustrophobic rather than kind of gleaming, right? So I don't know. Maybe move over to Note Performer, or maybe there's another thing that you could check out that is a little bit more just kind of kind of every day rather than like having really specialized wind timbres. Like I know that in Sibelius you can run a couple different or maybe several different sound sets at once. So sometimes I'll get entries where it'll be like note performer on the strings and Sibelius 7 sounds on the winds, and then like maybe a further sound set on the brass. And it'll actually sound really great, just because they've worked everything out. But I'm not saying you have to get obsessive about it, but it is like when I first started, it didn't make any difference how good your sound set sounded in my line of work, which is orchestrating concert music and crossover things and so on. But like things have gotten so specialized, and there's so many non-performing musicians or non-musicians involved, and other people who make budgetary decisions and everything else. And sound sets have, in the meantime, the potential for them to sound more realistic to a non-musician has become stronger and stronger. So it is something where you've got like virtual orchestration, right? That group, and people are really kind of obsessed with getting it to sound really correct, right? And I respect that so much. So that's the other side. That's the flip side of the coin, right? So I'm somewhere in the middle. I think that like you should use them in a way that makes everything sound as best as possible without too much extra work. Because I'm lazy. All right, so he says, in the middle of a massive marathon of recording these. Okay, so the whole question is whether or not the harp would actually work here, though. Okay, like right now you have got the harp teamed up with your second flute. Okay, pretty good so far. And you've got your clarinets down here, right? So like, it is almost crying out for some kind of dynamic mixing, right? Almost to the point where like making the clarinets softer might be the solution rather than making the harp louder. However, I still feel that because of the clarinets, there's no escaping the fact that the harp's beauty here is going to be veiled, right? If you had this part playing in very soft violas, no competition, but except for the flutes themselves, right? Now you are taking your flutes, way down to E here, right? Your second flute down to this low E, and it isn't really a crisis or an issue or anything until the bassoon starts to come in here, and then that's putting pressure on the middle voice here in the flutes, and then as things start to get louder, and then you add the horns, the flute right in here is becoming ever more a sort of an afterthought, until finally here, by the time you get to this, with all this other stuff going on here, the overtones from the combined bassoons and horns, you have A2 horns here, and this stuff that's happening in the clarinet, this just, this second flute part is pretty much toast. So, what would be a better person here to better player that wouldn't do that, wouldn't have those problems? English horn. The English horn will, has a tendency to work really, really well with other instruments around it, and kind of like emulate parts of it will emulate other parts of the timbre of the other instruments. You'd be surprised at how flute-like an English horn can play when it is playing long, like playing octaves or playing closer harmonies with the flutes. They can get along really nicely, and it covers this register with just so much strength and gorgeousness and everything else. What's the risk? That you lose that wonderful combination of flute and harp with the harp, both the harp harmonics. But I mean, there's a chance that the harp harmonics won't be heard anyways, right? So those are some of the choices facing you if you want to clean this up a little bit and make it sound a little bit more sparkling. Now, I don't know what your mock-ups, I don't know what your playback is like on your mock-ups for your application when the part doesn't have a dynamic at the beginning. But these parts did seem a little strong to me. I would say mark this whatever dynamic the clarinets end up as, it should be what the bassoon is here. And whatever dynamic the bassoon is, the horn should be half that. Okay. So this is a place where I would definitely keep the horns down. Like since you have the violas anyways, the violas are going to be outplayed by the horns in this combination. So I would put the horns at pianissimo, and then I would leave everything else the way that it is. I really love this interaction. This like the way that you have got the clarinet family to play together. All right. So my only caveat about this, the thing that I want you to think about is, like, you do it again here. Could you possibly go to bassoon and English horn here? Right, then you get that variety of color rather than just like, oh yeah, we're back to that same combination again. Right. Try to not repeat yourself too much in situations like this where you're coming back to the same thematic material. It's like, oh yeah, okay, same theme, same accompaniment, right? Just try to have something that shifts and changes every single time. I love the idea of sul tasto muted violas, but that is all the more reason for your horns to be really soft here. They could be pianissimo for this entire screen, and it would make me happy. So this is lovely. So this is very cool in here. So what is the risk here? The risk here is that elements of this new episode here may feel too much like a continuation of what happened before, right? So and it's mainly the flute on top, right? So it's just, oh yeah, the flute keeps going, right? It is still a flute melody thing. And if you have taken my advice and added English horn in here, it'll sound very similar to the oboe right here, right? So maybe that's a reason to avoid it, but certainly the second flute is not going to be able to do much constructive right in here, in the face of this much weight, especially from the horns. I mean, it's mainly the horns that are the problem. But I really love the way that you transcribed the left-hand figuration here. Really nicely done. Yeah, so cool. Really love it. And then you brought in, like, I think this is really wise, you brought in cellos to sort of strengthen things. And I'm wondering, like, if after a certain point you could, like, make the thickening about different instruments. Because, like it just goes on and on and on with the clarinet family, and then you give this big solo to the clarinets, right? So maybe when this happens, you can change the color of the winds, right? So here you have bassoon. So if you have the bassoon coming in here, you kind of don't need the bass clarinet anymore, right? You can give them a break. Maybe you can go to bassoon here, and then the instrument that completes the thing could be, it could be maybe second bassoon, could be playing some of these pitches, right? So it's all bassoons, or it could be maybe English horn, like I mentioned before. Just some way of creating some variety, right? But I think that this is wonderful right in here. The strings are really, really needed to create some kind of contrast in here. Now here, while this is gorgeous, it's the lower octave is going to be absorbed right into what's going on with your cellos and your low wind doubling. So take it an octave higher if you really want it to be heard, or change something about it so there are more high notes. And then here, piano subito, and then you have a little surge. Okay, so the problem here is that the surge, as you can hear in the mock-up, the surge is eating up the sound of the harp. And here you're pushing all the way to mezzo forte in your horns. Keep them submerged. I said pianissimo before, to mezzo piano at the most here. Okay, and then, all right, so surging strings, you say poco, but I heard a surge that was pretty big, like up to mezzo forte in your mock-up. Right, so just maybe tweak your mock-up so that this isn't so big. Okay, and maybe like you could fade out. I'm kind of looking at how you have it all scored here. Or you fade down to pianissimo. Right, so just make sure that this fade really has that much, like in your mock-up, it has that degree of diminuendo built into it. So yeah, don't surge too much here. And here, the piano part should, excuse me, piano, the harp part should start, like here, your forte. Stay forte. Stay forte. What's the point of getting soft? Stay forte. And put in the crescendo mark. And as for these people, bassoon and clarinet, maybe this is a place where you could once again kind of get away from too much clarinet instrument. Maybe, yeah. See, so it's really, you're using a lot of clarinet, and then like this goes up to flute and then oboe and yeah. All right. Just watch out. That's what I would say. But yeah, but I love the broken octaves here in the harp. And this is the kind of thing that will actually be broken up between the hands. So, like the left hand playing first and the right hand of the harpist kind of going up and down the strings. It's not as easy as it sounds. Like it's not the same thing as like for a keyboardist to do, but it still is a cool thing, a cool effect for the harp. It might need a little practice. All right, so you got the doubling here. Just make sure that the winds don't outshout the harp, and that the strings don't outshout the winds, and then you have got a nice balance here. I think that you could take up the dynamic. The dynamic could be stronger here in the solo. All right. Okay, and then right here, pianissimo. Keep it strong in your harp. Keep it strong in your winds. Right. So you just kind of come in here like diminuendo from what? And look, if you're not going to have any second voice writing in here, just get rid of the second voice rests and just have this be in first voice and just say number 1, right? And you're even telling us like oboe 1. You're just saying flute nothing. So I think that like maybe is this an application where like that whatever number this is, it will tell you what this is in the flow or something like that, or in the yeah, so just get rid of the second voice stuff and just have a single, it just, all of this stuff limits your vertical space, and it just ends up, here you're ending up with dynamics and so on, just kind of bashing into your system text and so on. Okay, and I'm on board with all of this. I think it's really, really cool. However, don't assume that this part here is like this at all. It isn't. It's a different thing. This is about real solitude. So there's a little bit right in here of establishing the background and then nothing in the piano part. I think that nothingness is incredibly important because when you fix the harmonic context of this bar, this guy is no longer wandering freely about the countryside. He is walking down a path that has been set for him by the harmony. Get rid of it. Just everything. These little notes, nothing. By the time they get to this downbeat, there should be nothing underneath that beautiful flute. And you'll see that less is more there if you try it out. All right, and which just takes us to this final little and it's so fun. Like I just say, the way you originally scored it with clarinets and so on, that works for me. Do you really intend to slur repeated notes? Right? What does that mean to you? Does it mean that you just forgot to make the slur shorter? It's the same thing with like the beginning here, importing the importing the slurs from the piano part, right? Did I have a tip on that? To not do that. So yeah, don't just drop the slurs from the piano part, because like, what does that do? Da, it's like this is all like da 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 da. If this is slurred and it's all taken under one breath, then sure, like they can add a touch of portato or just a little emphasis or a little gut or something to give you the rhythms in here, but you lose the precision of the dotted rhythm. Da da ta ta ta. Doesn't that sound a lot cleaner? Shouldn't that be in all of these dotted rhythms that have repeated notes? Of course, like when the dotted rhythms don't have repeated notes, forget about it. You don't, that can be slurred because we have a difference of pitch, right? But when the pitch is the same under the slur, you have to decide what that means, right? Because and you should be the one to make the decision, not just leave it the way that it is, and you should decide whether or not what you intend is a kind of a legato articulation there, or whether you intend portato, in which case you want to add tenuto marks, and it's better really to slur the group of portato notes and then have a separate slur for other notes. Right? So you have to make that decision more. Do not let this kind of problem enter your scoring. All right. So it's just the same problem as here. Duh. You lose the precision of repeating this note here. And same thing here. Wouldn't it be better to go da ta and then ta 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 da ta 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 ta? I mean, and I see what you want here. You want this to smoothly go back and forth with just almost no tonguing involved. But I just feel that it what you end up with that is you end up lacking the sense of pulse, right? And look, if you're going to put pizzicato on this anyways, then you do have the articulation to a degree, right? So that cancels out this, and that just leaves the one in the middle, right? And at the beginning, which that I don't see an excuse there either. So watch out. All right, and that what else is happening there? We got basically what's going on in the melody, the melodic octaves, and the thirds and so on, and that's nicely done. No complaints there. Yeah, just to check something here. Yeah, okay, so divisi unus. Ordinario of what? I'm trying to see what it was. I mean, we had sul tasto here. Maybe did this ordinario sort of migrate its way up from canceling sul tasto and the violas? Anyway, maybe you forgot to mark. Maybe you forgot to mark sul tasto here, and that's what I'm thinking. Okay. All right, but this is all cool. Beautiful, nice, direct scoring. I like it a lot, which takes us to the middle, where we were a little while ago. And I better stop here. But yeah, I hope that gives you enough pointers. You seem to me like you are, that you are already kind of pretty developed as a composer, and you've been working with this kind of scoring for a while, but maybe not on this scope or in this genre or whatever. So I hope that some of my suggestions don't seem a little too nitpicky, right? Or maybe just a little bit too much pointing out the obvious thing that could have been proofread a little bit better or something like that. But one way or another, I just want to let you know that I really enjoyed looking at your score, and I'm it was great to have an entry from you this year, and especially on this piece, and especially in the context of us being able to help the people who created this music, right? The inheritors of Barvinsky's tradition that he helped to lay down as a teacher at the conservatory there. And so I really, really appreciate you being a part of that, and I'm actually kind of really curious to think with your approach here, how you'd approach the 2023 example if you are able to pitch in that year, and even just send me a shorter web one, a shorter website subscriber one, or a longer Patreon score, whatever you're able to do would be really interesting to hear you take on that score. I was like looking at it yesterday, like what the selection for next year, and thinking through it and thinking, wow, this is going to be challenging for me to get it right because the stakes are high with it. You'll see why when you see it. But having said all that, thanks to everybody else, Patreon folks and website subscribers, viewers. I really appreciate you all being part of this process and watching these videos, giving us comments below, and views and likes and so on, and just really kind of keeping this alive. It really makes a big difference to me because wow, this was a confusing year to my schedule. So hopefully next year will be a little clearer, a little better, and hopefully I don't just get completely like wiped out at the beginning with too much work. I have to orchestrate 2 operas next year, so I have to really pace myself and figure out where everything works on the whole scope of things. So more information about that coming next month, and about all the things I would like to do. Hopefully get some of them done in the coming year. So watch for that, and I will see you again with one more score today, which I think you're really going to enjoy. Talk to you soon.